After all the latest updates, internal server issues, and more unknown delays, the long-awaited part 2 of the armor progression guide is finally here. If you haven't checked out the original video already, I highly suggest that you do, as without the knowledge from the previous video, this one is going to make a lot less sense. Although, assuming that you've already seen the previous video, today I'll be covering all of the dungeon armor progression that you will need, updated with all of the reworked catacombs requirements and new metas. So, with all that being said, let's get straight into the video. Alrighty, so as you can see, today's video is going to be the part 2 of the armor progression guide. I've finally been able to get around to recording this video, as there's been so many crazy things that have happened over the past few weeks, and I apologize in advance for such a delay. However, with all that being said, I'm going to just jump straight into all of the information for today's video, how I'm going to style the entire video itself, and of course, bring you guys all the information that you will need to become the best player in Hypixel Skyblock when it comes to choosing armor. So just to preface this video really quickly, the structure of today's video is going to be as follows. I'm going to start off by talking about all of the strength-focused classes, so that's going to be Berserker, Archer, some strength-based healers, and also strength-based tanks if you choose to play tank and be a lot more aggressive. And I'll cover all of the armor for all of these classes, and then I'll move on to the mages and mage-based healers alongside tank and other really tanky classes. So with that being said, that means that first up here we're going to be talking about all of the strength-based classes. So that's going to include Berserker, Archer, strength-based healers, and also strength-based tanks. Now before I do actually get into all of the armor progression for all the other classes as well, one thing that I really want to stress at the beginning of the video here is that Berserker is really the only viable class at the very beginning of the game. In order to actually get past the entrance floor, floor 1, and probably even floor 2, I highly suggest that you do play Berserker or tank or even Archer for these 3 floors, as if you decide to choose anything else, it's going to be a lot more expensive, a lot more difficult, and the requirements for a lot of the other classes are a little bit trickier. So early on, stick with Berserker, get to floor 2 and floor 3 completion, and then from then on, I have a lot more suggestions for different armor progression and things that you should purchase in today's video. So right off the bat here, to start us off with the first armor sets that I'll be covering for the beginning of this video, and as you can see, it'll be all the ones in my inventory here, being the Superior set, Frozen Blaze set, or the Strong Dragon set. Now, I'm not saying to go out and get full 5-starred, ancient, maxed out Superior armor. It's just sort of the bare bones, whatever you have before you actually start doing dungeons. If you did have Strong Dragon armor before you even started playing dungeons, go ahead and rock this. If you already had Frozen Blaze before doing dungeons, you can go ahead and use this too. But for me, when I started out playing dungeons, I already had Superior armor, and this worked absolutely perfectly from floors, entrance, all the way up to floor 3. So as long as you have any of these pretty solid outside of dungeon armor sets, they'll be really good to get you started into the beginning of dungeons, and then you'll be able to move on to the dungeonized armor later on with all the armor I'll talk about in this video. Now, for some weird reason you don't already have any of these entry-level beginner armor sets, or maybe these beginner level armor sets aren't good enough for you and you aren't able to really tank anything and you die quickly or just don't do enough damage in general, then I would first of all suggest that you level up your skills, as your skills are very important and they translate quite significantly into dungeons itself. But aside from that, there are options like the skeleton grunt armor or the heavy armor, or just some of those really low level catacombs 1 to 5 requirement pieces. And in some situations, those armor sets are a little bit better than the ones that I just showcased, although usually the ones that I just mentioned should be great for the very beginning of the game. Now, once you have progressed on from the Strong set, Superior set, Frozen Blaze, or whatever you had already before starting dungeons, the next armor set that you want to get would be most definitely the Adaptive armor set. Now, I've got one right here which is fully maxed out, hot potato booked, fragged, and everything, and the overall cost of this entire thing didn't even come out to be anywhere near 10 million coins. And once you do get your floor 3 completion, this armor set is absolutely amazing for lots of things and should be able to boost you all the way up until floor 5 and potentially even floor 6, although if you are to complete floor 6, that depends a lot more on how good your team is. Now, after completing floor 5, there are quite a lot of options that you can branch out and choose many different things when it comes to armor. I'm going to list out a few of them in this video, and usually the more common options, but feel free to experiment and test and try completely different things out yourself. This is just a guide and should not be followed as law, but are some pretty good options. Now, what most people do after floor 5 completion is they go out and buy 3/4 Shadow Assassin and then any sort of chestplate that works well. I've got a strong chestplate because that's just the one that I have on me already, and I don't have a Zombie Knight chestplate, but most people will go out and buy a Zombie Knight chestplate and use that because the Shadow Assassin one is way too expensive. Although if you do decide to go a little bit higher and get your Catacombs to level 18, you can go out and actually max out a full Frozen Blaze set and get it all 5-starred as well. And if you are someone who likes Frozen Blaze, maybe you like using the Blaze pet and you really like that aspect of the game, Frozen Blaze, when it is dungeonized, can be a really good option. And the same thing applies to Superior. Superior is actually a lot more versatile and arguably could be considered better than the Shadow Assassin armor set, although Shadow Assassin will always do more damage than Superior, but Superior can be used outside of dungeons, have the magic find bonuses, and a lot of other stuff, which Shadow Assassin does not actually provide. Another important thing to note about the Superior armor set is that it will always be weaker than Shadow Assassin in terms of damage, and it will only actually be even comparable if your skills are of a decent level. The main downsides to using Frozen Blaze over Superior or over Shadow Assassin is that you are pet locked to the Blaze pet. However, the downsides of using Superior over Shadow Assassin is that you do have to have decent skills, and you won't actually ever get the highest amount of damage possible at this part of the game, though the trade-offs can be considered valuable if you do prefer to have more intelligence, more defense, better EHP and stuff like that, which is why I raised the point of using full 5-starred Superior, though Shadow Assassin is usually what people go for. And then for this sort of stage of the game where you're probably doing floor 6, maybe you're doing a little bit of floor 7s and trying to get your completion there, I highly suggest that you go out and max out a full Shadow Assassin set. You can choose to recom this if you want to. I would, although I never recommed my set because I didn't really need to, and I swapped over to Necron pretty early on. Though using the full 5-starred Superior still should be able to get you that floor 7 completion and is a very viable option as well. But like I said before, most people do pick Shadow Assassin, most people get the entire set, and most people do prefer Shadow Assassin as it does do a substantially higher amount of damage and usually is the better option for most strength-focused classes. And then last but not least, you guys probably saw this coming from a mile away, but the final endgame armor set for strength-focused classes is most definitely the full Necron set. Now, you can actually use the Maxor armor set if you want to have a bit more speed inside of dungeons. Most people do put on the boots only, max out a pair of boots, and then run the Necron armor and like a black cat pet or something like that. Although generally speaking, get 3/4 Necron and then run any helmet of your choice. I have a Warden's helmet because the Warden's helmet is one of the best outside and inside of dungeons damage helmets, although the Tarantula helmet is a really great cheap alternative, but as a general rule of thumb, I highly suggest you get any of the golden boss heads. Now, when it comes to pretty much any of these 3/4 armor sets, when you are running these inside of dungeons, you want to always use the boss helmet for the respective floor. Especially as a Berserker, the Golden Necron, Golden Livid, Golden Satan Head, these all do substantially higher amounts of damage than any other helmet inside of dungeons, and with the addition that you are able to 5-star them with Gold Essence and Diamond Essence, I highly suggest that you mix and match them with these respective pieces. And these options here are way more situational and should only be used if you either already have them or you have some weird budget where you can't get this one, but you are able to get, say, the Tara helmet or a Warden's helmet. Now that we have all these strength-focused armor sets out of the way and you guys are aware of what you should use if you play Berserker, Archer, strength-based healer, or strength-based tank, the next part of this video is going to be all of the mage or mana-focused classes. Now, just like I mentioned at the start of the video, I highly suggest that you only get into a mage-type class or anything that isn't Berserker after floor 3, because once you hit floor 3, you unlock a lot of really good items. And this is really where the separation between classes actually occurs. So just like I mentioned with these strength-focused classes, Adaptive is going to be a must-have once you unlock floor 3 completion. Now this is going to be a very common trend throughout the entire video, but as a general rule of thumb here, Adaptive armor is really powerful for early on playing dungeons. It's super cheap, it's super easy to get, it has great EHP, and also provides a lot of damage for whichever class you choose to play. So most definitely pick up a set of Adaptive armor. armor when you do hit this stage of the game. Now, adaptive should be able to take you all the way up until floor 5 and maybe even give you floor 6 completion. And at this stage of the game, you should be around Catacombs 18. Maybe you're a little bit lower, but the point is you have floor 5 and 6 completion. Then this is the stage where you should probably swap out to either 5-starred Wise Dragon armor, or if you prefer it, Necromancer Lord armor instead. Now, if we take a look at just Wise Dragon chestplate pieces on the auction house right now, you can see that a 5-starred chestplate is only going for 800,000 coins completely clean. Really easy to get, super cheap to get your hands on. It provides some really great stats inside of dungeons. And running the 3/4 Wise Dragon armor with these shadow goggles is a very great budget option and should be able to take you all the way through the floor 5, 6, and possibly even early floor 7 stages. And overall, Wise Dragon is a great option. However, if you prefer it, you can go ahead and use Necromancer Lord armor instead. If the chestplate is too expensive for you, you can decide to use a 5-starred Wise chestplate and then run the rest of the Necro Lord set. Although I would suggest swapping out the helmet as well for the shadow goggles, because the shadow goggles are really good at this part of the game. Although you don't even have to use a Wise chestplate or a Necro Lord chestplate, you can actually use a perfect armor chestplate. As you can see, there are many options here for all of the tiers of perfect armor. If you were able to use a tier 9 chestplate, go ahead and use a tier 9, but if you could use anything higher than that, ideally a tier 12 chestplate. Combining the tier 12 chestplate with the Necro Lord or the Wise armor, whatever you choose to use, is going to be a very great option, and overall is sort of the entrance to late game armor set that you will need when playing dungeons. And then, of course, the final end-all be-all armor set that is currently inside of Hypixel Skyblock for mage-focused classes is, of course, going to be the 3/4 Storm set. Now, the Storm set, as you already know, provides great intelligence. It's designed to be for mage, and it does a lot of damage for the class. Now, a lot of people do pair this with the Wither Goggles because the Wither Goggles do way more damage and are usually just a lot better in general. However, like I said, with the strength-focused classes, Golden and Diamond boss heads are really good too. Like I said before, it is a general rule of thumb to use the boss head of that floor, but I've even seen people using a Warden's helmet or even just a Storm helmet in general. Ultimately, when it comes to helmet swapping for any class or anything in general, helmet swapping is just personal preference and what you prefer to use. Me personally, I use the Wither Goggles, but I have used the Warden's helmet and I've used the Storm's helmet in the past. But like I said before, the main armor set that you want to end up with at the very end of the game for Mage has to be the 3/4 Storm set. And now, last but not least, the final class that I do need to cover for the end of this video is going to be, of course, the Tank class. Now, Tank is a really interesting one because early on, tanks usually only just need to do a lot of damage, and the class passives are what give it the immense amount of defense and EHP. So you do generally see a lot of strength-focused tanks early on, but if you do decide to go through and have a very tanky tank build, then this video will go through all the steps to be able to achieve that. Just like I mentioned with all of the mage armor sets, you shouldn't be playing tank until you reach around floor 3, because that's when you unlock the adaptive armor, and the adaptive armor is the gateway to be able to play any class that you want to play. Now, just like all the other classes I've talked about already, the adaptive armor will significantly boost tank's abilities to do basically everything, gives you more defense, it also reduces the damage that you take. It's really good and just overall a great option early on. But once you move on from the adaptive armor set, the Protector Dragon armor set, when you do decide to 5-star the pieces, is actually a very good option. The Catacombs requirements for this are very low, and you should be able to use this at around floor 5 and potentially even floor 6. As you can see just by the chestplate alone here with some very random enchants and hot potatoes, you get almost 900 health inside of dungeons and then around 840 defense as well. And that's with the Loving Reforged, not even the Giant Reforged, which is ideally a better option. And if you look at the cost down the bottom there, 500,000 coins for a maxed out Protector chestplate is a very great choice. And the Protector Dragon armor set can be really good if you decide to use that as a tank. Now, one thing that I should cover for the tank class, which does sort of come into play whenever you can afford it, is actually going to be the Reaper Mask. Now, the Reaper Mask is arguably a very expensive helmet. You not only need to be Zombie 7, but you also have to have the money to afford one. But assuming you're able to afford a Reaper Mask and actually use this thing, as you can see, the item ability is really powerful. You get 2 times healing from every source ever, and it does upgrade a couple of zombie-related items, which can be somewhat helpful. But the health, defense, intelligence, and just the overall overall versatility of this helmet in dungeons is really, really powerful, and most especially for the tank class, the Reaper Mask is a very good helmet to swap out if you decide to run 3/4 of an armor set. Now, the next armor upgrade I do have for the tank class aren't necessarily the most useful ones, but are ones to keep in mind if you do want to be a super tanky tank class. But that's actually going to be the super heavy armor set. Now, the reason why nobody really talks about the super heavy armor set anymore is just because a lot of people tend to run strength focused tanks nowadays, or just mage focused tanks instead. But this armor set has been neglected for a long time and has some incredible stats inside of dungeons, especially if you go out and get one of the high quality pieces. As you can see from these just top quality 50% base stat boost floor 6 super heavy boots, the defense on these is 576 inside of dungeons, and then of course with all the other pieces that stacks up quite a lot and is a really great armor set. And when you pair this with a blue whale, or maybe you pair it with some other defense boosting items, the super heavy set is a very good option, but once again flew under the radar for good reason, and people just don't really like it too much. And just to complement what I just said with some other underrated tank options, Necrolord once again is another good option you can use. Ideally, you want to be using half of Necrolord being the leggings and the boots, with the Reaper Mask for the helmet, and then a perfect chestplate for the chestplate. At this stage of the game, you should be able to afford a tier 12, and the tier 12 chestplate will be a lot better for you. It's also slightly cheaper than the Necromancer Lord chestplate and just has more EHP in general. But once again, to reiterate, these upgrades aren't super powerful. They aren't really common either because people don't care about being super tanky in this part of the game, which leads me on to the last armor set for this video, which does relate to the tank class. And if you've been playing Hypixel Skyblock for a while now, you probably already saw this coming. That's going to be the Goldor armor set. Now, Goldor is pretty cheap to get. It's really easy to get as well, and it's just really powerful for the tank class. Obviously, this is the Wither set designed for, and you would expect that the Wither set that is designed for a class to be the best one in the game. However, I would suggest you use Goldor with the Reaper Mask like I mentioned earlier on. This is the stage of the game where I would expect you to be able to afford one, and also expect you to actually use one. And running tank with 3/4 gold or a Reaper Mask, or maybe even just some perfect pieces if you're not super rich, to play tank up in the later stages of the game, when you do have something like an Estrella and other weapons that complement it. Now, before I do wrap this video up, I do have a couple of honorable mentions to get out of the way, and just some armor pieces that aren't really talked about too much and should be considered a lot more when playing this game. Now, if we have a look at all of the dungeonizable dragon pieces, you could see here that I didn't cover the young armor, unstable armor, or even the old armor set. Now, the old dragon armor set isn't really that good, and you're better off just using Protector because you get way more defense with Protector. But the young and the unstable dragon sets are actually really powerful and can be a great substitute for pretty much any class if you do value speed, or you just like the unstable set for some weird reason. Almost all of the dragon sets have always been either a great option in or out of dungeons, and with the changes to all of the requirements that you can use them at a much lower level, it is highly suggested to just use any of the ones that you prefer. And like I said at the beginning of the video, this is really just a guide. If you prefer using Superior as a healer, or you prefer using Superior as a mage, then go ahead, do that if it suits you. But hopefully this video has taught you guys some basic things about the armor progression in this game, with all of the changes and new reworks done over time. If you did enjoy this video, then please do leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel, as I make these Hypixel Skyblock videos every Wednesdays and Fridays. I've also got a double upload this week because I did miss out one last week due to all the internal errors on Hypixel's end. So be sure to look forward to the Voidling minion setup video that I do have planned out for this week. But with all that being said, that's gonna wrap up everything that I had for today's video. And as always, take care and peace.
Eat the chips like that. I got you, bro. I got you. Yo.